You're right, though, it's a dilemma. And I think if at any point I were to leave consulting, it would be for that reason.
Okay guys, before we begin, here's a small message for you. If you want to become advisors and truth tellers to some of the biggest CEOs in the world, then consulting is a great career option for you. Which is why Altuni brings in Consulting Festival for anybody who wants to get introduced to the world of consulting by some of the biggest names in consulting and embark on a very successful career. Details are in description. You're like a mercenary, you come in, you do, okay, ye change kar do, ye kar lo, and then you go away. And then the actual running, the execution of everything, also, the consequences of those decisions are faced by a business, an organization. How do you, make sense of that?
How I've sort of bridged that dilemma is in my day-to-day role, I try to bring a lot of that practical business owner mindset. And it has been helpful for sure, because I'm always trying to think of, the more capability building driven side of it, or the practical execution side of it in my studies as well. So you're right, though, it's a dilemma. And I think if at any point I were to leave consulting, it would be for that reason, because I miss building something. And there's only so much building you can do from the other side of the table. There's a point at which you do have to stop.
In 4 years of interviewing consultants, Riya, this is the first consultant who's admitting to this, that there is a dilemma to it, right? And I appreciate that. Riya, how did the shift to London happen? You seem to have found your feet in New York, and then to make a move to a completely different continent, a completely different team, a completely different set of clients who don't often speak your language as well. I'm sure London handles a lot of European clients. So what was that shift like? What was it, a personal life decision? Was it a professional life decision? What was it like?
So the interesting backdrop of this is I moved to New York in 2016, and that was the year of the election, right? So literally, I started working at McKinsey in September 2016, and November is when Donald Trump got elected. So things were very different. The moment that year, the whole swing for immigrants, brown people, changed. The primary reason for me to leave New York, or the primary impetus, was because my work visa was getting over and I had to leave. So that was the primary impetus, right? Now, there were a couple of places I could have gone to. There was also potentially going back to India on the table, moving to other countries. And there's this particular visa where if you move out of the US for 1 year with the same company, you can come back to the US on the same visa, on a similar visa, and continue to work there. So I'm currently on a 1-year transfer to London with the intent to potentially go back to New York in the next year, but we'll see.
Riya, coming a little bit to your personal life, because for all the professionals out there who especially choose to change cities that often, go to different, pursue opportunities in so many different continents, it also has an implication on their personal lives in terms of making decisions around relationships, family, etc. What has been the impact on your personal life to pursue such a high growth trajectory career?
I mean, I've seen all sorts of backgrounds and personal situations work, right? So I think I've seen in different archetypes, they make it work and it works just fine. In my specific case, I think it helped that I already have a partner who, when I went to New York, he was already there. And that helped because I think being a consultant and single is even harder because you don't have any time to meet anyone new. So I think having a partner already was nice and helped me find some stability. It's also helpful that my partner is actually in a pretty high intensity job as well. He works in investment banking, so he gets it. And we don't have any children, and that also I think is a factor that hasn't been and something that I'm constantly fighting a dilemma for. So I think so far it hasn't felt like a personal relationship wise strain. I will say though that there has been a strain on health. And that is one that I'm constantly trying to fight, right? There's the long hours and sometimes not making time or prioritizing your own health gets to you. I think especially in my second year of consulting, I actually had some stress induced illnesses, and the more I spoke to people about it, the more I realized that it's not uncommon at all in a high
Right.
intensity job like this. And if you think about it, it's not surprising, right? With the long hours, with the general high degree of stress, and also this this archetype of someone who's in that role, who's more prone to deprioritizing personal health than others, which is where I found myself. And so I had to really make some changes in my life to be able to make this sustainable for me. And the travel and making sure I eat meals on time and traveling at certain hours. So not taking the 6 a.m. flight, taking the 7 a.m. flight. Even if that's 1 hour of sleep every day, I tried to make changes, small changes, but changes that could actually help in the long run. That has been the biggest impact for me, I think, personally, which has helped. And it's a work in progress because it might continue to be a struggle over time.
Right. Ria, how is a high growth driven competitive environment like McKinsey reacted to your reactions like these? Like when you go up to your bosses and say that, look, I don't want to take the 6 a.m. flight. I would rather take a 7 a.m. flight.
Yeah.
I am facing a little bit of stress at work and I want it to be dialed down.
Yeah.
There are so many competitors at work as well, right? So how is an organization like that able to take this kind of a message from an employee?
Actually, the one thing I've been surprised about is if you ask, there is often people will say yes. And so I've been pleasantly surprised. And I'm sure there is a point at which when you ask, you can't do it, right? You can't deliver on it. And that's a little bit of the judgment of what you can and cannot do. The thing
Right.
for me that was helpful was, and that's why I could only do it in my second year of being a consultant, right? Not in my first, because in my first year, I myself didn't know what the degrees of freedom were. So I think it's a bit about me identifying what those degrees of freedom are and then working around them. And also, especially in a place like McKinsey, and I'm guessing it's true for other project-based roles as well, where you don't have a boss per se. A lot of it is self-driven. So if I know what time my next meeting is, I just have to make sure I'm there in time for it. And if I can make sure that my 7 a.m. flight gets me there, then fine. Now, this is the extreme ownership culture that I think a place like McKinsey has, which is great from a learning perspective. And also because if you're able to identify those degrees of freedom and make it work, then it works very well for you. But obviously there are days and there are times where I'm the only one on the hook. And I know that there's a meeting at 6 p.m., let's say on a Friday, and I have to prep, and therefore I need to stay up many more hours than is typical. So there are also days like that. But as long as my current goal is, as long as I can make that balance between, manageable days and completely crazy, stay up all night days, as long as that ratio is somewhat balanced, it's okay for me. But
Right.
but I guess to answer your question, I've been fairly pleasantly surprised with how many degrees of freedom one has if you just raise your hand and ask, or try to orchestrate your life around it without changing the outcome. Because at the end of the day, if the outcome is good, if you're actually able to deliver the impact for the client, which is all that matters, if you can do that, no one cares what time you go to sleep, no one cares what flight you take. And that's a bit of a double-edged sword, and it's scary at times, but it's also, if you can make it work for yourself, it's pretty good.
Ria, so far in your career, you've seen an entire spectrum of organizations. You've seen startups, you've seen companies that have been more than 100 years old. You've seen consulting firms, you've seen investment banks, you've seen media organizations. What is your unique experience as a woman in the space of, pursuing a high growth career?
I actually think I didn't realize this until my first job. When I say realize this, I mean, I didn't realize the fact that I was a woman and that there aren't too many women in the business world. It just wasn't something I even thought about, right? Until my first job. But then I was in financial services, which is typically a male dominated industry. And that's changing slowly. But my first few years is when I really became aware. And I think that's when there was this moment of a personal crisis where I was trying to distance myself from being a woman. And in hindsight, like it's not ideal, and I don't want to raise my daughter in a world like that. But having said that, when I used to go to work, I would try to I didn't wear earrings, for example, for a year because I wanted to look like a man, and I would wear box shirts and try to tone down the fact that I was a woman. And if you think about it, that's so crazy, right? Because there's no way I could have been successful doing that eventually.
Right.
But because as someone who was new to the workspace, I had picked up on this nuance that being a woman is not associated with being competent. And I wanted to be proven competent. And so I was trying to dissociate myself from being a woman, which is, if you think about it, very logical, but it also puts you in a strong bind because you can never really do that. Yeah. And that's true for all minorities, I've realized, right? And you can be a minority in any situation. If a man walks into a room full of women, he's the minority. So any minority, right? And at that point, I just realized that I was a minority as being a woman, and that was my instinctive reaction. Over the years, though, I realized that that's obviously not a helpful approach to take. It doesn't help me in the long run. It helps me almost resent my workplace because I can't be authentic, etc. So that's been something I've been trying to embrace over time, which is trying to establish competence while embracing the fact that I'm a woman. That has been the fundamental shift that has happened over time, and it's still happening, right, as we go. The thing to say, though, it's not something that I notice as unique to India. So it's definitely not that that nuance or cultural shift exists only in India. I noticed it all over the world, right? So even in the US, I've worked with organizations where the organization has been primarily white men. Right. And the only women that exist in the organization are usually assistants or secretaries. And so when I walk in there trying to be an advisor to the CEO, I know that all of the men in the room are primarily seeing me from a lens of a certain role that they've already been accustomed, for no fault of theirs, right? They're all well-meaning men, but just because of what they've seen, there is no role model for them to look at. So I've had to be aware of it and try to push against that, which means trying to constantly prove my competence time and again. And as a consultant, that's especially unique because you don't work with the same team forever, right? You have to work with different teams.
So you have to keep doing this over and over again.
Exactly. And in some way, it's good because you do it often enough and you really figure it out. You figure out the different nuances. But it's draining and feels personally just like a emotional baggage to carry. But in any case, I think things are changing. 10 years ago, when I started my first job, I definitely felt like I couldn't wear earrings to work. And now I feel like I can. And I definitely feel like I don't think being a woman is directly associated with being competent. What I do see, however, is at senior levels, the more senior you get, the landscape is shifting. So now I think at entry-level roles, for the first 5 years, 10 years, there have actually been a lot of women in my peer group at consulting especially. But now when I look up, there are very few role models that I actually know personally or I'm able to relate to as being successful senior women. And that's a bit, I think, what's missing now, personally for myself. And I hope that will change over time. But yeah, that's where we are.
All right. Thank you so much, Riya, for doing this with us. You've been extremely candid and extremely open about a variety of really tough topics. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Kunj. This was really fun. Thanks for your time as well.